Hello, Julia and I are on day one of our wheelie slow cooking tour, and we're on Foxglove Farms. And this is Michael Ableman. He owns the farm, and we just wanted to ask him a couple questions. We just did a beautiful tour of your farm
on Salt Spring Island.
On Salt Spring Island, and yeah, one of the questions that came up for me, and I don't know very much about farming at all, is you were talking about intercropping. And I just wondered if that is a common technique in farming and why you chose to do that.
Well, is intercropping a common technique? I don't necessarily think it's a common technique. Generally, farmers conventionally, at least in the last, say, 50, 75 years, will plant a single crop, and then they will either turn that under and plant another crop in succession, versus planting multiple crops in the same field space at the same time, which is what I would call interplanting or multi-cropping. But traditionally, you go back thousands of years. There's a long tradition of it from parts of Asia and other parts of the world where people had a pretty clear understanding of the interrelationships of various plants together, the beneficial qualities of certain plants to soils, and how you can be planting a crop for nature's crop along with the humanity crop simultaneously. It's efficient. Rather than waiting for the field space to open up, it's better to have a field space that is fully covered. It confuses insects, it confuses pests, it provides an environment that probably is beneficial to all of the above. Now, there are plants that are antagonistic to each other, and there are certainly combinations that don't work, but I think it's an area that we don't know much about, frankly.
So you're kind of experimenting a little bit, but
I'm always experimenting. I'm not a studier. I don't, read about things. I do them, and I essentially do what agriculturalists have done for thousands of years. I am involved with trial and error. That's the evolution of agriculture, 7,000 years of it. So I still do that. I try stuff. It works, it doesn't work, I find out things. I'm always experimenting.
One other question I was thinking, when you were saying humanity's crops and versus maybe not versus nature's crops, what do you mean by that? What is
well, I mean, if you look at like we went up and looked at our grain field, and there was a crop of wheat with an understory of clover. Well, the wheat is obviously a crop that we will harvest, we will grind into flour, and we will sell as flour, or as whole grain as well. The clover, is strictly, it's a legume. It fixes nitrogen from the sea of nitrogen. It covers the ground and protects the soil from erosion, maintains certain moisture levels, and it adds organic matter to the soil. So it's there as nature's crop. It improves the soil simultaneously while the field is producing wheat. So, if you were to go to a traditional wheat field in Saskatchewan, for example, or the U.S. Midwest, traditionally conventionally is a better term, that field would be a field of wheat, and when it was done, maybe there'd be a rotational crop, but probably not in some cases. But the intercropping of the two would be fairly unusual.
Thank you.
And then I was just wondering what your thoughts are on what's the hope for organic farming for you?
Hope for the future. I'm not actually that interested in organic farming anymore. I think that my interests go well beyond the concept of organic. I think that unfortunately people got hung up on organic as kind of the end all. Organic is merely a set of principles and practices that address what you essentially are not doing on your farm. It's not necessarily always a plant positive or a positive movement. And it's a step in the right direction. I support it. I'm a practitioner, but I don't refer to myself, I don't use the word very much. I prefer to talk about the broader issues around food and agriculture. There's bigger fish to fry and much bigger issues to deal with than substituting rabbit manure for ammonium nitrate or something. We figured that out 20 years ago. I've been doing this a long time too, so I've been at it for for 37, 38 years. So organic was something we were sorting out 35 years ago. It's not a new discovery. I want to think about much bigger issues like issues around water and soil and farm labor. Who's going to actually be farming in the future? Because there aren't many of us doing this work, and a whole range of access to food. Which is most of the good food grown is not terribly accessible to everyone. It's accessible to those who can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
So organic is a fairly exclusive thing. Local food is an exclusive thing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at a broader perspective, and I don't have the answers by any means. But I think that if we get hung up on that piece, we're not going to take the next step.
I think people in the city sometimes too, especially myself, will grasp for organic because they don't know, they don't have the idea of all the things that are put. They're like, okay, this is healthy because someone says it's organic. There's no pesticides. It's not GMO. So they.
Well, I think that's good. I mean, I'm probably the same way. If I'm traveling, I go in a store. I'm like everybody else. I'll buy the organic product.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't consider it's not something I choose to spend a lot of time writing or talking about. I do a lot of public talking and writing and stuff. And it's there are other things that I prefer to get into. But truthfully, if I'm in the marketplace, if there's a conventional product, actually, if the conventional product was grown by my neighbor, and there was an organic alternative that was maybe shipped from halfway around the world, I'd probably buy my neighbor's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm a contrarian. I have some issues with the local food movement as well. So that's not the answer as well. And I think it's all about reinventing language. Using new language to describe what we do, reinventing these movements continuously, because once they become mainstream and part of the public lexicon, they lose their value, they lose their meaning.